The most important thing in casting is to form a loop.
What is it?
Is to have a tight loop. You need a sexy loop. My dear subscribers, thank you very much for tuning in again. And before we start this episode today, I have to apologize with you. Especially with the few people who commented and put and forward me on a link of another man who is doing casting videos and talking about waves suddenly.
Those loops, or these waves, are travelling from the rod tip towards the fly.
In this episode, I'm going to show you how the mentors in the game act, how science works, how the shift is already happening, the friendly revolution of fly fishing, the Casterman vibration.
Casterman vibration. Positive and independent.
And also, why knowledge is precious. Because you can only be as good as your knowledge. And I say that without shame, blame or guilt. I am buzzing today that you brought me onto that link, and I thank you very much for doing so, and I apologize again. And what is fascinating there is, in my opinion, that the autotelic approach is working. And that autotelic approach is even working if it goes a little bit against the grain. And it also shows again that fly fishers are the best problem solvers in the world because they can overcome. And it's important in this context that you allow yourself to change your perspective and that we are allowed to ask questions here and follow them consequently through, as well as that you give yourself permission to deal with the shit in problem solving. Also that you are aware of what's going on in the fly casting community, in the fly casting scene, and also with your own fly casting. Because fly casting is changing, and before we jump now finally in that episode here, and the casting waves of another instructor, I would like to remind you of the 3 principles of positive reinforcement casting. Principle number 1 is Fehler sind Helfer. That means the mistakes are our friends. Principle number 2 is look deep into nature. And principle number 3 is make it play and scientific. And that is exactly what the fly casting instructor is doing here. But before we look into his video, we are looking into his introduction first.
G'day, fellow casting nerds. This video is a redo of a presentation that I did for the Flyfishers International in early October. At the time that presentation was made, the guys at Flyfishers International said they were going to release the video or release the presentation on video so that people could see it. That was done in early October. It's now early December and they haven't released that yet. So what follows here is my redo of that presentation.
When I put up the original Wave Spey video about 5 years ago,
happens out of this small wave, I generate a bigger amplitude wave, which is exactly D-loop angle path.
I got crucified and bullied from the community all over the place, and I'm still banned from a lot of Facebook groups and other public groups and get ignored from fly fishing magazines all over the world for this work. And I know that this kind of sends a couple of waves through the community. But if I look at this here, I have to say bravo on the one side, and on the other side I have to say, hold on. This caster is making a presentation for FFI?
Redo of a presentation that I did for the Flyfishers International.
From my work, this caster is presenting my work to the FFI, as an alternative approach now, suddenly
it appears to be a wave. And we can measure the period, we can measure the amplitude. It's essentially a wave. So let's think of it as a wave. I know that a lot of physicists will be looking at this saying, this isn't a wave. That's fine. For the purposes of teaching people, I think of it as a wave because the things that I do with my rod tip to influence the tension in the cast are the same things that you would do if it really was a wave. Now, whether it is or not, I've had quite a lot of arguments with this, about this with people. I don't particularly care for those arguments. By teaching casting as if the loop is a wave, I'm getting great results.
And it's just trying to steal my work, in my opinion. I don't know if you know how science works, but if you are a scientist, you know already that there are crystal clear rules for research and also crystal clear rules for ownership, intellectual property. And Wave Spey is mine. And it would be very nice if you do a presentation for the FFI or for whoever else, if you would name the originator. You know what I mean? Good. Great. So we can base this conversation now again on respect and communication. Speaking of communication, in the next clip here, where this caster here introduces my method as the alternative and also, by the way, confirmed by this highly skilled man as the better method to start people casting and to, in my opinion, generate a feeling. You can see how the shift is happening. How the shift is happening from the wave to the loop. And I told you already, I started a revolution. And I think this particular instructor here is trying to jump the vibrational fence. And when you look to his speech here, he says, when I move that rod sideways, I put a wave in that line. And you see how he's insecure about the choice of his language.
Those loops, or these waves, are traveling from the rod tip towards the fly. And if I pause a little bit longer between each movement of the rod tip, that has the opportunity to move that loop further away from the rod tip. Until I start moving the rod tip back over here, that's going to keep moving that direction. The longer I pause, the longer that wave travels through the string.
Those loops or the waves are traveling towards the fly. If we want to be scientific here, we have to know, or we would like to know, what is it now? Is it a loop or is it a wave? Where is the loop coming from in fly fishing? Who made up that definition? How congruent is that definition with the truth and with that what is written in a dictionary? Now, watch the next video and you see how he lengthens the rhythm and how the movement of the rod tip suddenly produces a cast.
Has the opportunity to move that loop further away from the rod tip. Until I start moving the rod tip back over here, that's going to keep moving that direction. The longer I pause, the longer that wave travels through the string. And you can see it's traveling further and further as I wait longer and longer. Now eventually, if I wait long enough, that movement of the rod tip produces what we know as a cast. But it's still a wave traveling from the rod tip towards the fly. So here's the little wave. It's getting bigger and bigger because I haven't moved my rod tip any further. And eventually, that just becomes what we know as a cast. I haven't done anything different with the rod tip. I've just waited longer between each movement of the rod tip. So that's a little bit different to what most people believe was the mechanics of the cast.
See what I mean with the shift? And the little waves become eventually a cast. And he closes this introduction of that alternative method, that it is a bit different than what most people believe in the cast and in the mechanics. Yeah, it is different, and you know why? because it has nothing to do with belief. It has to do with knowing. Let's think of it as a wave. And now I suddenly hear it appears to be a wave, and you can measure the period and amplitude suddenly.
Talk about the wave experiment or waves in general, because I think loops are no loops, and I think they're waves. At least the line, it behaves exactly like a wave, and I want to show you what can be done with this wave, or how you can use that wave for yourself and for your casting.
Thank you, bro. Great, brilliant. I would like to warmly invite you for a cup of tea, and I would also invite you to become a PRFC instructor. Number 3, that would be then already. And the physicists do say it is no wave, but for the purpose of teaching, he says, it is better and the best. Are you asking the real good and important questions? Here is the question for me. Because for me is the important question here not that you are trying to plagiarism, to steal my work and to put foreign feathers on your head. For me the important question is, why does it work better? What does it do to people, and how can we get that across together in a peaceful and fruitful way without anyone getting bullied or discriminated or left out along the way? Again, the intellectual property about the Wave Spey is mine. You are very welcome to use that, and again, I invite you warm-heartedly over a cup of tea to discuss this here in the show. I started the FlyQ series because I don't let me bully, and I also don't let my work being stolen by some master casting instructor to shine in front of the FFI. Let me go back to the introduction before we finish that, because there is so much more content I have coming up and so many cool people making cool comments. I'm sorry, I will get to them as I can later or as soon as possible, but we have to get this straight here. And the fact is that I pissed off a lot of people in this community, but somebody, as you look back and forth now in this whole complex, had to do that, so that fly fishing can find its determination again. And if you are considering to jump the vibrational fence, you're more than welcome to do so. And you can also come in the show. We have a cup of tea and talk about it. The history of my FlyQ series from half a year already shows that flycasting instructors are indeed ducking the answers to the questions I'm asking here all the time. And you only owe the truth to yourself. But you have to ask your question here. Did the classic teachings grow the sport at all? And are they as effective as casting instructors are trying to make you believe? Because it is already confirmed. By the way, also by a couple of people who tried a fixed line anchor. Oh, we haven't talked about the fixed line anchor yet. Within that video, that presentation is also kind of creeping into introducing the fixed line anchor, which I already did last August. And the same place, actually, where the Wave Spey video was shot to, and I did that on purpose. Because a circle closes with the fixed line anchor, and that is the safety on your weapon that a fly rod is. And that safety makes it easier for your mind to relax let me put a little clip in here for you so that you find that whole video. You can find that whole video also on my YouTube channel, of course. It's called How to Practice Flycasting with Fixed Line Anchor.
Fixed anchor exercise, and this is the future of flycasting, and this will help people in the future to gain control over this rod and line system in no time, because it has it all in it. My anchor is fixed down there, and the first thing we do is we establish a little wave pattern that is stable and symmetric under the rod tip. And we lengthen that frequency until we end in what they call deconfiguration. And you probably can already see that this cast would develop if it wasn't tied on. So what the fixed anchor does is it takes you off the worry of making the cast and tangling up. It lets your mind relax into what you're doing and to gain feedback, because if your mind can't relax, you cannot gain any feedback over this rod and line system.
Why does this vibrational form of teaching work better? That is the real interesting question here. And I personally think it works better because it attunes your brain better in the harmony and synchronicity of the whole game. It gives you rhythm, it gives you feeling, it keeps the tension in the system at all times. And that is what the presentation is originally about, about tension, I get it. So that you don't see the waves that obviously will pack in it in the tension presentation, though it's not so obviously that the plagiarism is going on here. But my subscribers, fair play to them and thank you again, found the fraud, and I'm going to fraud check the whole flycasting instructor landscape. And you see yourself that my approach is working better. It has just been confirmed. So now the question is, are you consequent with it? Are you following through? Are you following through, and do you go and dig up the history of the loop in flycasting and its connections and its effects? Because what I personally think is, and I can prove that, and I did prove that already, and it is obvious, is that the loop in flycasting is already the output and not the input. The control theory says focus on the input and output will make itself. But there's much more in this video to discuss about. Also that minimum power thrill that the dude has also, in my opinion, nicked from me in this discussion 5 years ago. But I let that slip now because I want to grow the sport of fly fishing. And I have no interest in battling with flycasting instructors. But we have to keep it real and clean here. Scientific and play. Scientifically, the Wave Spey origin is my intellectual property. And you're very welcome to play with that, and we can meet here in my show and discuss that. And I hope you follow that invitation, and we can grow the sport from here, get together and find new and easier ways even to teach people and to communicate flycasting, and also to communicate the feeling of a fly rod. Because what the teachings, there are two major problems in the teachings. One is they're only output oriented and focused on that loop all the time. And the second one is they are not consequently following through with the hows and the whys. There's so much coming at the moment into all this positive reinforcement flycasting thing, and also realizations of the controlled process casting and the autotelic approach. I could tell you, I could go on for hours, but it's only getting jumpy and I must sort this all in my head first, and I will come back to you very shortly and we'll discuss that again, and hopefully we get to talk to this man and get to ask a few questions, and we'll see how that turns out in the future. I thank you very much for watching. Tune in again, and please go out and have a little bit of fun with the practice of the wave spey on a fixed line angle. The most important is in casting.
Oh, is it a wave? What is it now? Is it wave? What is the cast? What is it now? Is it a loop?
You cast the loop or a water. And also, please do not forget, we don't own the water owns us.